Billy, if you want to take a moment to unmute yourself and make a quick introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, guys. My name is Kamyar Ghabili. I'm IMG from Iran. I graduated in 2011, and I did research for years, and then I matched into diagnostic radiology last year. So I would say I have many features of IMGs that you guys are looking for. Again, non-US IMG, doing research for years. I did prelim surgery for a couple of years and ended up matching in diagnostic radiology. So I would be happy to share my experiences with you guys.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Ghabili. And Dr. Pandey, if you want to introduce yourself as well.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Ankur Pandey, and I'm glad to be here today. And thanks for organizing this wonderful forum. So a little bit about me. I did my med schooling back in India, after which I completed my radiology training back in India. Then I decided to move to US for further radiology training. I came to Johns Hopkins, where I did a couple of years of research as a research fellowship. And then I was able to match at University of Maryland, where right now I am. I'm in my final year of radiology residency, and I'll be graduating next year and going into a body imaging fellowship to Boston next year.
Fantastic. We are so excited to have you both here tonight. So moving on to our first topic of the evening, which a lot of our applicants had a lot of questions about, was research opportunities. So before we get into that, as many of the applicants may know, the NRMP recently released data on research, abstracts, presentations, and whatnot. So if you look at point number 5, the mean number of research experiences, wasn't too much of a difference between US IMGs and non-US IMGs in terms of those who matched. Both had about 3.6 of these experiences. However, when you look at the mean number of abstracts, presentations, and publications, for matched US IMGs, it was 7, but for non-US IMGs who matched, it was all the way up at 16.9. So really, I think the big takeaway here is, it's not just about finding these research experiences, but having meaningful production from it as well. So for our panelists, our first question is, how should I go about finding a good research opportunity? Should I ideally target programs that will take IMGs for residency? So Dr. Ghabili, if you want to start off on this one.
Yeah, this is a good question. So, there is no right or wrong answer to this. And everything that people say is based on their personal experiences. But I would say, if you're residing outside the United States and you have visa issue and you're looking for a visa, so just go wherever they give you and support your visa. So it can be, anywhere, from a very big name to a medium program. You just need a spot to start your journey in the United States. And then, ideally, you guys need to be at a good place, well-known place, working and doing research with a well-known person and, attending in order to get a good letter of recommendation for your application. But again, do not target the very, top programs in order to match there. So, if you have a research spot, definitely go there, but do not limit yourself to only big names. For doing research, I would say, big names are fine just to get a letter, but also if you end up having a research spot at a program which they are friendly with IMGs in the past, that's also a good option to consider. But it doesn't necessarily mean that if you do research at a program which had IMGs in the past, you'll have a guaranteed spot for clinical residency. No, there is no guarantee for that. But you can try. So altogether, long story short, just do research, productive research here. As Sahil said, productive means publishing, presenting abstracts, because the whole idea is just to If you have good productive research years, people will vouch for you. And when when you're doing research in a team of radiologists, you can ask for letters from different people who you had interaction with. Plus, people just see what you do when you are presenting abstract and like big conference like RSNA. People see that and people just recognize and memorize your name. And this can really work well for you during the match process.
Great. Thank you for all those great points. Dr. Pandey, what are your thoughts?
So I 100% agree with whatever Kamya said, and everything is true. And there is no real right or wrong way to do this. But one thing is that we know for sure is that research definitely helps. The only thing I'd like to add to what Kamya said is when you look for research opportunities, and just to answer that question, the way I did it is I just reached out to multiple programs, especially big names, because they programs where they're involved in research, and especially I had some particular interest where I wanted to do research. So I found out, I came across some people who were doing research that I was interested in personally. Whether that's the case or not, it's just a good idea. A good idea is just to reach out, send emails, show your interest, and people will at least 20% people or 30% people will respond back saying, okay, yeah, we have an opportunity for you, and then you can move forward and consider your individual situation. The other thing is, remember that you are doing this research fellowship ultimately, or research to get into a residency program. So it's good to bring that point early on in the discussion, and always be very straightforward when you're talking to your future research mentor about the research opportunity. Make it very clear that, yeah, I'm very interested in research, but ultimately I want to join a residency program. And be very clear in what you want, and ask them, would you be able to support my residency application in a year or two after I work with you? And the reason I say that is because I was very fortunate. My mentor was great, awesome. He supported me all the way through. I had a very productive research time, but I've also seen people who spend 2 years, 3 years doing research, and they give it their all. And at the end, when the time comes for research application, they did not get the kind of support that they should have. And that's just, and then when they figured it out, they realized that that particular mentor has that kind of a track record. He likes people to do research, but that's all he's interested in. When it comes time for application, he's not ready to support their application the way they want it to be supported. So just be very clear early on in the process.
Great, thank you for that.
Yeah, I just want to elaborate on what just Anchor said. That's totally true. If you have an option of choosing between attending who has is a big name, does tons of research publications a year, versus an attending who has this background and track record of matching IMGs when they were there postdoc or research fellows, definitely choose the second one, because there are clinical attendings who, if they don't have any interaction with the IMGs in the past, it doesn't mean that they don't want to support you. No, there are some tricks that, it's really different from matching an IMG versus matching a medical student in a diagnostic residency program. So knowing those little tricks and, giving a little more support compared to a support given to medical students, that really helps down the road. So definitely choose the second one.
Great, thank you both. Our next question is, are there any IMG friendly programs that you guys would recommend to find unpaid or paid research fellowships? And how long are these fellowships typically? Dr. Pandey, if you'd like to start.
So as I said, I did my research at Johns Hopkins. I know many other big programs offer those kind of fellowships. I am not aware of a go-to resource where you can find these research fellowships advertised, unlike many other things like residency spots. I'm not aware of that kind of a source. Maybe it exists, but not that I'm aware of. The way I did it is just reach out to multiple programs, and you can get a sense of if you start looking into radiology residency program, you can get a sense of which programs do some kind of research. And for that matter, any medium or big size program that offers radiology residency has some or the other research going on. So it just doesn't hurt. You don't even have to spend too much time. It can be a generic email with your interest, and then you can just target it a little bit to each program and just send out those emails. So yeah, that's how I would do it. As far as paid versus unpaid, that's a very tricky question, and it all depends on what kind of funding your mentor has, and that can be a little tricky to find out, and especially it can be uncomfortable discussion early on. So I mean, many a times what happens is you show your interest, you talk to your mentor about funding. If they have some funding, which some of them have, they can offer you a paid research fellowship. But there are many times the kind of fellowship you want, it may be an unpaid fellowship. In that case, you start as an unpaid fellowship, and then at some point, if your mentor gets funding, then they can start funding you. So it can be very variable, and that's something that you want to discuss early on. But just be aware that both types of situation exist. And sometimes it can be just, and since we're discussing this, there are some certain pros and cons in each situation. For example, if it's a paid fellowship, you have to remember that your mentor, if he's paying you for doing certain amount of research, I'm not saying it has to be, but it is possible that he may not be as supportive of your application as an unpaid fellowship, because in that case they just think, okay, you are doing your research, you're getting your name, and that's it. And many times the kind of recognition you get for that research may even be you may not even get the ownership of the research project that you want. Not because of anything wrong, but just because you might just be hired to do a certain kind of job in that research, but they may not even give you the ownership of the project. So you might not be doing the entire, you may not even be writing the papers. You might just be doing certain post-processing work, and that's it. And that's the role you get. So on the other hand, there are certain situations where you can get full ownership of the projects. It may now, such projects by their nature tend to be non-funded projects. But what that means is you can get full ownership. It can be your baby, and you can take that research project from beginning to end, and you can get a first authorship. But on the downside, because those projects may not be funded, because nobody has got enough funding for those projects, it might be an unpaid fellowship. So just two sides of the coin.
Great. Thank you for all of those points. Dr. Ghabili, anything you'd like to add?
I totally agree with Ankur. Just, a couple of more thoughts is, I myself, I did research at the Department of Urology at Johns Hopkins for 2 years. My beginning of research journey in the United States was there. So the way I found this position was just, as Ankur said, just sending emails to different people. And I almost sent like 1,000 emails to different people. And like 20% replied. Most of them were just, like negative and, saying no. But, eventually I found the spot. So it doesn't mean that this is the only way. These days, people have tried to just advertise on social media, on Twitter or Instagram about, any possible, openings in research. So that's one way to, if you're really looking for a spot, just, be actively looking for spots. It doesn't mean that, nobody will tell you that there's going to be a spot. You need to just look for a position. And, the other way is, just try to follow people who are doing research at different departments of radiology in the United States. And, if you're just following their Instagram, account or Twitter account, they're posting, they're updating, about what they do. So that person can be, a good source for you, because if that person is applying this year for residency, and if that person is matched, then his position will be, open for next year. So if you're aware of that position, and if that person knows you, that you're also looking for a spot, you may be a good candidate for that specific, program. So, the bottom line is just be actively looking for positions, and try to, follow different accounts on Twitter, like you guys, the TheRadRoom, or, Inside the Match, or, there are other, Twitter accounts who are, posting different positions in research or any other like residency programs, just to be a little more active.
That's a fantastic point. Now, an interesting point that you brought up was that you actually did your research here in urology. So I guess a follow-up question for you guys is, do applicants necessarily need to be doing a research year in radiology? I'm sure that's preferred, but if they couldn't obtain that, is a research year in a different specialty okay? And I will start with Dr. Pandey on that one.
I will let Kamya take that first, because I would like to hear his opinion. I'm totally biased.
Sure.
So my pathway was not very straightforward, very complicated and different, because I did 2 years of research in urology at Johns Hopkins, then 2 years of research in urology at Yale, and then I did 2 years of surgery, and then I applied to diagnostic radiology. But I use my research, products from 4 years of research in urology in my radiology application. Why? Because, the research was multidisciplinary between urology and radiology. It was on prostate MRI, on PIRADS. I was, interacting with a couple of radiologists, and eventually I got support, I got their support. So I would say you don't have to have the title of radiology department research in your background. The only thing you need is, having a support and letter of recommendation from radiologists. So if let's say you have a funding or grants which comes from other departments, that's fine. Use them just to, finish your research years. But eventually you're gonna need a support from a radiologist.
Sounds great. Yeah, Dr. Pandey, if you have anything to add.
No, I completely agree. I mean, I feel like research is definitely important, whether it's radiology or not. First thing should be to find research. But again, my biased opinion would be, if you get a chance, obviously a radiology research is definitely more important. And for a very basic reason, that ultimately you need some radiologists to support your application. And it's just easier that way. Now, as Kamya said, he was able to make the best use of his situation by working with some radiologists and then getting their support, but which is great. So you just need to be actively involved in some kind of radiology research and have interaction with radiologists, because ultimately, bottom line, you will need some of these folks to support your application. And also just shows that how much interest you have in radiology. So yeah.
Most definitely. Our next question is, how important is taking a research year for matching radiology if I will be a fresh graduate next year? Dr. Pandey, if you want to take that one.
I think it definitely helps a lot. It goes a long way, especially if you're a fresh graduate, even more so, because as a fresh graduate, as an IMG, you really have not much to show on your application when it comes to showing your interest in radiology. In terms of your academic achievement, the only thing you have are your USMLE scores. And even those seem to be changing now with the pass-fail system. So I don't know what you have on your application to show. So having a year of radiology research in US, or even radiology research outside of US, I guess, would definitely go a long way, because as we all are aware, in this country, and especially in radiology, research is still given a lot of importance, because that's how the specialty survives. So just doing some amount of research shows how committed you are to this profession, and that you are ready to devote a crucial amount of your professional time to the advancement of the field. And that's a big commitment, and that makes a big point. Even some of the US graduates, they are involved in radiology research, and I'm seeing that more and more. Like every year, I'm seeing at my program, we have bunch of so many med students rotating through radiology, and many of them have shown interest in research. They try to get involved in research, and it's all for a reason, because they know that goes a long way. So as an IMG, you can only imagine how important it is. Yeah.
Absolutely. Dr. Ghabili, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, so I would say the buzzword here is commitment to radiology. That's for sure. So how to show your commitment to radiology is something, we as IMGs, no matter how high your USMLE scores are, our applications are not, at some points, are not comparable to applications from medical students in the United States. What does it mean? It means that, let's say Dean's letter. I mean, IMG's Dean's letter is not a systematic, letter. It's not really, I would say, it's not really useful to compare your how competent you are compared to other applicants. So here you need somehow to shine among, let's say, 1,000 applicants, which, like last year, there were more than 1,000 applicants in diagnostic radiology. So you have to shine. How, scores, yeah, I mean, scores are okay, but, these days people have good scores. So if you get like 270, 280s, yes, you're going to be outlier. Otherwise, your application wouldn't that much shine. So by doing research, you're going to show commitment to radiology, meaning that, listen, I'm not interested in any other specialty but radiology. That's why I'm spending 2 years or a year just from out of my pocket just to show my commitment to radiology. And number two, again, productivity among 1,000 applicants.
I think we're losing you there, Dr. Ghabili, a little bit.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I think my connection is somehow weak.
Yeah, I think we got you back now.
Okay. All right.
Perfect. Well, that concludes the research portion of our webinar. I'd like to invite both of our panelists if they have any last thoughts as far as research goes that they just want to make sure they cover before we move on.
I think we covered almost everything by now.
Perfect.
Yeah, I can't think of anything else. I mean, try to get just as we said, like try to find a research spot in this country. If that's not possible, try to do as much whatever research you can do at your program or in your country. But definitely research would definitely help. And try to, as Kamer was saying, attend conferences in person, because those are a big venue for making connections. Now, using conferences to make connection is an art, and not everyone can make a full use of it. So that's a whole different thing. But the first thing is you have to be able to present some abstracts at a conference, and then there's so many people. You'll see people in your situation. You'll meet program directors, and at least some of them will be responsive to when you try to approach them. So that can be helpful for whatever it's worth. But it's kind of a hit or miss, but it definitely doesn't hurt.
Absolutely.
Actually, I just want to add some more, one more point.
Sure.
Though I touched on that a little bit, but I think this is very important for IMGs who are doing research. So because I had, I talked with a couple of IMGs in past weeks, and I figured out that this is a common situation for most of IMGs. So we are doing research with an attending with a clinical professor in radiology, and eventually, we get a letter from him or her. But sometimes, we need to get the most of our, research years. It means that usually what we do research is like a teamwork, right? There are like a couple of radiologists, 2-3 radiologists, but yes, your main PI is your boss, and you're going to get the best letter from him or her. But you already worked with other radiologists most of the times. So sometimes forget to ask for letters or ask for support from them. So do not miss this opportunity, because when you're in a team of different radiologists, you do research, you show your commitment, your productivity is great, you publish, this shows that you're a good candidate. So you can also ask for their help and support during this process. It can be at any level of application, from getting a letter to getting support down the road. But do not miss this opportunity of getting support from other like researchers in radiology, like other attendants who are not your main PI.
Thank you. Excellent points from you both. So now I'll hand things off to Ashley, who will be moderating our next session.
Great. So I'm going to lead us into the clinical experience part of our session. The first question, since we just finished with Dr. Ghabili, we'll hand off to Dr. Pandey, and it'll be, how do I go about obtaining U.S. clinical experiences?
So it's a good question. Maybe I don't have that much experience in the pathway that most IMGs go through, which is before applying to diagnostic radiology, they go and they do like some kind of shadowing or like clinical rotation or observership to get clinical experience here in the United States, which if possible, if it can be reflected on a letter of recommendation, that would be great. So because my clinical experience was through doing prelim surgery training for 2 years, so I prefer to talk about this because I know like some people couldn't end up matching in diagnostic radiology last year, so they started their prelim years. So this is great opportunity because doing prelim surgery or internal medicine or like transitional year, this is the best hands-on experience you can ever get in the United States. A real hands-on experience, you're taking calls, you're interacting in a team, dealing with patients. You should get a good letter from your program director or an attending whom you work with during your rotations. So if you go through this pathway, which is like prelim or transitional year, you should be good. There is no doubt about your clinical, acumen. In terms of, the main pathway, which most IMGs go through, which is, doing research at the same time, doing some clinical shadowing. I think maybe Ankur can touch on that.
Yeah, I mean, so since you're talking about clinical experience, I just want to highlight something very important, which I don't know if most applicants are aware of. At least I was not when I was early on in my application process. So when you apply for radiology in the US, you are actually trying to match into 2 positions, not one. One is, of course, radiology, but the other one is you need a prelim year, which is 1 year of internship that you have to do. And that's a separate match. You have to match into that separately. It has separate, you send separate applications which are not related to your radiology application, and it's a separate, you match, even though you rank them all together in one system, but you have to find a spot separately. And it is very much possible for you to match into radiology and not get a prelim year, which prelim year can be in medicine or surgery or transitional year, which I did. And also these prelim years are sometimes at least as hard to get, if not more, than radiology. And the reason for that is because these prelim years are required not just by radiology, but also by other competitive specialties like radiology, including dermatology, ophthalmology, to name a few. So these are coveted spots, and people applying into all these competitive specialties are trying to match into prelim year because all of them need those spots. So I have seen people matching into a radiology, but not being able to find a prelim spot. It's not very common, but I've heard stories, if not personally, even if I don't know anyone personally. And the other way is also true, that you match into prelim year, but not into radiology. So, but coming back to the point for US clinical experience, I do not think US clinical experience is very important as far as radiology application goes. I don't think most of, again, that's my thought process. You will never know that answer for sure. I don't know what goes on in program directors' minds, but from what the sense I get, most of the people higher up in radiology, they don't care for your US clinical experience as much. However, for these prelim years, it becomes important. So these clinical experience may play a role in you being able to find a preliminary spot. I did not do any US clinical experience before my radiology application. However, I had done a few months of observership before doing my radiology residency back in India. I had come to US and did a few months of observership. I don't know if that really helped me getting a prelim year. I do not think it helped me a lot just by talking to people and my program director, but I think people who are applying if I have to decide, I would pay more. If you're planning to spend your time in the US, I would give #1 importance to research. And if that's not possible, or if you have some extra time and you find an opportunity, a US clinical experience cannot hurt. But I do not think it's a make or break. It's a deal breaker situation to get US clinical experience for radiology. But it might help for the prelim. And also, just to add on, just to stress upon the point that Kamyar made, the US clinical experience can not only come in form of observership, but also come as a backup plan in case you're not able to match into radiology your first year, but you're able to match into your prelim year. It's still it's not everything is not over. You can actually use that clinical year doing your prelim year as your US clinical experience, and then again apply next year to radiology, which would mean you'll end up doing 2 years of 2 prelim years, but still that first year of prelim year might even just be more helpful to get you your prelim year the second time, and then match and give you another chance to match into radiology.
Both made really great points, and I think it's excellent how you highlighted the importance of a prelim year and how that really does serve as the clinical experience. Do you know of any virtual observerships that are available? If so, especially in radiology, do you think that that would be a valuable experience? We'll start with you, Dr. Pandey.
I am not aware of those situations, and even if they are there, I doubt how helpful they would be, just because it's somebody you don't know, and it's. I mean, how do you even design that kind of observership? I mean, just being in the reading rooms and seeing the workflow, I don't know how that would pan out. And the only thing I can think of is that would just be a hindrance to the radiology workflow, because to be frank, there's not much role of observership in radiology, unlike medicine, because in medicine, you go along with people, you take history, you talk to patients, and you can present cases, and that's a way that you can show your clinical skills. But in radiology, it's a different workflow. You are just sitting and reading images. Maybe to some extent in interventional radiology, you can do that if you're really interested in IR. But in diagnostic radiology, observership is basically you're just sitting in the reading room behind somebody's chair and just watching them look at images and whatever little value that has, it becomes even more less if you're trying to do it virtually. So yeah.
Great points. Dr. Ghabili, do you have any more thoughts on virtual observerships?
I totally agree with you, Ankur. It's doing virtual observation in diagnostic radiology. It's my personal thought that it doesn't really make sense. I mean, it kind of makes sense if your goal is just to, get a letter, like support letter from that program, if possible. Sure, that may be, a way of getting a letter, but you know that it's not, application is not just to put a check mark saying that, okay, I have 3 letters of recommendation and done. No, you need a real support. If you're getting a letter, your letter should make a difference. It doesn't mean that just, put a letter, which, people do not know you. Their only interaction is through like virtual world. And, as Ankur said, it's, you're just watching people, going up and down, scrolling up and down the images. So I don't personally think that it's going to be a game changer for your application.
Definitely understand that. The next question is if there any benefit to having completed a radiology residency in a different country. And given Dr. Pandey's experience, I guess we'll start with him again.
I think it definitely helps. It goes a long way. Just again, it's a very straightforward thought process. If you are just put yourself in a program director's shoe, and if you're trying to match, if you're trying to take a candidate, and if you have a person who has already done his radiology training, what reason can you have to not give him an advantage over the other person? I mean, so I think it definitely helps. Now, is it necessary? Definitely not. In fact, since we're talking about it, when I initially did my radiology training, my plan was not to do a residency. There's something called alternate pathway, which is unique to radiology. I don't know if maybe people are aware of it, but it's basically what it is that if you have done your radiology training in another country, in radiology, you can come to the US and you can do 4 contiguous fellowships that have to be at the same program for 4 consecutive years. And then you can be board eligible, which is the ultimate goal of doing radiology residency. Everybody wants to be board eligible to be able to become board certified. So by doing this alternate pathway, you can do that. And that's what my plan was initially. And I was actually able to match into fellowship. However, I decided not to go into that path because for various reasons, the most important being from what I was hearing is that people in the US, things are changing and it's becoming more and more hard to get these fellowship spots. So I've heard some horror stories where people actually get, and this is very important. I mean, this is I hope nobody has to go through this, but it was a big eye opener because I'd heard stories where people get fellowships, up to 3 fellowships, and then in their final year of 4th fellowship, they are denied that fellowship. And what that means is you got good training that you wanted, but the most important goal of becoming board certified is not fulfilled, because even if you do 3.5 years of fellowship and you're not certified, and there's no guarantee of securing those 4 consecutive. It's basically you're applying every year and trying to match into fellowship. So I just didn't want to take that chance. It seemed like a sword hanging on your neck throughout those 4 years, and it is a lot of uncertainty. Now, a lot of people do it, and it definitely saves you maybe a couple of years here and there, and it might be a good option for some people. But I just didn't think it was worth it to take that risk. And the other thing is just the training in the US is very different from, at least from where I train. There's much more comprehensive training here, more modalities, imaging modalities. In the US, they scan a lot. So you see a lot of other images. Maybe it's overused. So, but as a trainee, it doesn't hurt. So my point is that doing a radiology training in your home country helps, but it is not necessary. But if you have done your training, it can help you in getting not only securing a residency here, but you also have the option of doing this alternate pathway, which you can decide whatever suits your need.
Great, very thorough answer. And then Dr. Ghabili, do you have anything to add?
So I don't have personal experience about this, but based on my, the things I heard from my friends or, IMG applicants who they already did training in their home countries, I would say another benefit might be, it might be easier to get research positions if you are already trained, because there are some programs, some attendings who they have like active projects looking for a researcher who is already a radiologist, because they research is purely like they really need a radiologist to review the images or interpret the images. So that training might help at that level of finding a research position. And the other benefit might be, I agree with Ankur. It's not, in your application, there is, although you may mention that you already trained in your home country, but I don't think that really plays a good role in getting interviews from the programs, because when programs are looking for applicants, I don't think they look at the previous training, or they may be, I may be wrong, but if you get interview from programs, I would say this is definitely something they're going to ask, and you can elaborate on that. And this may help during the interview rather than getting an interview from a program.
That makes a ton of sense. And I think it's really interesting that you both touched on it, the different doors it can open, even if it's not completely necessary. And I like that you both had two different ways to view those different doors. The last question for this is, outside of clinical and research experiences, are there any other jobs or experiences that you think will help boost any applicant's chance of matching? And we'll start with you, Dr. Ghabili.
So other than research and clinical experience, I've heard, people, if you're not really able to find any research position, then, if you have a training experience in radiology, then you can, end up doing like as a tech, radiology tech or ultrasound tech. I'm not really sure how much it would help you in application, but as a job or as a source of fund, it can be a good option. If your plan A, plan B doesn't work, so it can be your plan C. Or other than that, in your application, I don't think other than clinical experience and research experience, there is any other thing that help. But as a general rule for all, it's not specific to radiology, for all residency applicants, there is something in your application which they may play a big role, like your hobbies, your other experiences other than research, volunteer experiences. If they're really significant and you can elaborate on those, so people may have interest in your application. Again, this is not something that you can get an interview from a program, but let's say you got an interview. These are the things that you're going to talk about. About your volunteer experiences, about your hobbies, and then you should talk about your hobbies, and your hobbies should be really unique to you, ideally, but not necessarily. So yeah, I wouldn't add anything else.
Great. What about you, Dr. Pandey?
Well, the only thing I would like to add here is it's interesting that you mention any other experience, and one thing that definitely comes to my mind is informatics. And just because of the fact, like seeing where radiology is going right now, there's so much. It's so much depend. I mean, all of us know it's the most specialty that is most dependent on technology, and it's one of the fastest growing. It is the newest field in medicine, so it has the potential for most growth. And there's so much happening right now. There's so much data in radiology that people are finding it hard to find ways to find useful ways to use all the data that is available. And most of the research right now is actually focused in radiology is focused on how to use the data that we have. So I think if it's not something that you should actively sought to do, but I feel like if anybody has any background in informatics or information technology, and that can definitely be something that you can talk about in your application. And I'm sure I would be surprised if any program director would not be, at least for a second, would not be excited by looking at that in your application. Again, it's not something that you should actively decide to do just because you're planning to apply to radiology. But I feel like that would be very exciting, and that would be very helpful, especially in research. If you're considering research, that would open much more doors for research, and you can be much more productive in research if you have that kind of a background.
That's a great idea, actually. If we're going to do something. So at this time, we're going to pass it off to Arun, and he's going to lead us through the next part of our webinar.
All right, so our final section for tonight is going to be looking at, probably the most anxiety-inducing process of this whole thing, the application. So I know we touched on this earlier with you guys with research, but one of the most common questions we got was, how do you determine which programs are IMG friendly? I know you can look at the match list, but were there other ways you guys determine this? Did you cast a really far and wide net? What ways did you guys determine that? Dr. Pandey, you can start first.
So to answer your first question, is to how to find if a program is IMG friendly. So I really did have a good way to figure that out, and my crude way to determine that was just to go on the website for each program and look at their resident list and what kind of residents match in the program, and try to find if you can get some information on their background. And most of the time, these website list the medical school for these programs. So you get a sense of which programs are IMG friendly, and even if they've had one or two residents in their program as an IMG, I took it as a sign that they're IMG friendly. The other thing is just by word of mouth. If you know people who are matched, who have matched in particular programs, that can be very helpful. And that's where a research year comes in, because what research year does is it puts you in a situation in the US, in that you are in the circle, you're part of the system, and people are much more open to talk about these things, as opposed to sitting in your home country and trying to figure these things out. Once you're in the system, you talk to your people in radiology, if you're doing research in radiology, or even otherwise, and it just tells it. You get a sense of which programs are more are open to take IMGs. As far as casting a wide net, definitely. I think that as an IMG, I did not have any geographic ties, unlike many American graduates who would like to stay in a particular area. I did not have any tie. So I just went ahead and applied to as many programs as I could. And I think the rule of thumb, a good rule of thumb was, for me, was, say, for example, if I was applying to 100 programs, you want to apply to 30% programs or 20% programs that are in the upper tier, which are like your dream programs, and then 20-30 programs, which are small programs, which are ideally maybe not your first option. But again, there are no bad radiology program. Every radiology program is definitely going to train you enough to be a good radiologist. And I really mean this because radiology is a specialty where basically you have to learn on your own. You get images and then it's all up to you what you make out of it. So yeah, I mean, you can apply to smaller programs. And then for 50% of the of my application was targeted towards programs that are university programs, which I thought I had a decent, good chance to match into given my application. So that's the rule of thumb I followed, I used, and then I applied all over the country. Even though I was more focused on East Coast, just because the general understanding is that programs on the East Coast are more IMG friendly. Again, I am not 100% sure if that's true, but that's what I've always heard, and I have no way to 100% verify that.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Pandey. Dr. Ghabili, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I use two websites probably most applicants know as Frida and also the Residency Explorer. I would say the Residency Explorer really helped me a lot because, you know, it's the percentages which showing, you know, the percentage of IMGs in the program are pretty accurate. And also, you know, you can put your USMLE scores and like research experiences and all you know, parameters which come up in the you know, NRMP match data. You can put those and it shows, you know, how much how much, you know, odds of, you know, you have to be matched in that program. I myself, I use that number which shows the percentage of IMGs, and it doesn't have to be. I myself, I had a cutoff like a 5%. If I saw that, you know, a program has 5% of IMGs, I apply to that program. If a program has 0% IMG, I double checked their website. I looked at their, you know, residence list, and if there was no IMG, I didn't apply. But again, there are some programs which they are not big names, and, you know, because of some geographical thing, you know, people like US medical students are not really interested in those areas. So you can also consider those specific programs if you don't have specific ties anywhere in the United States. So I would say, so Residency Explorer, Frida data is, I heard that it's not really accurate. It's based on like previous years and it's not really updated. So I wouldn't really rely on the data from Frida, but at least it can give you a sense of, you know, if Frida shows 0%, you know, Residency Explorer shows 0%, and there is no IMGs in the program, you know, I wouldn't apply to that program unless you have, you know, enough money and you just want to give a shot. But this is the way I use to you know, select programs in my application.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, great. So that takes us to our next question here. So how should applicants approach preference signaling this year? I know it's a new feature for radiology in the 2022 supplemental application. And then the second part of that question is it better to send signals to programs I'm genuinely interested in, or those which are IMG friendly? So as you said, if we identify, you know, programs, a lot of IMGs, is better to send to those, or programs that might be of genuine interest to the applicant.
I'm not familiar with, sorry, what is the preference signaling? How does it work? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, so this year, it's part of the supplemental application that is being introduced for radiology this year, where applicants can select 6 programs, any program across the country, and send them a signal. It's meant to be in order to get like it should only be used for interview purposes, but essentially it's just a way to tell a program that you're extra interested. And so this individual was just asking, and we had several questions along this line, you know, is it better to signal the IMG friendly programs, or, you know, if there's a, you know, dream program, should they signal that? Because at the end of the day, they're kind of more concerned about is it interview invites like stack being big more important, or, you know, achieving their dream program? So no, there's really no right answer for it, but what would you guys
Yeah.
caution or advise applicants when they're faced with that situation?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough question. As you said, as you rightly said, I don't know if there's a right answer, or even if there is, if there's a way to find out the right answer. I mean, if given, if it was me, I would just do it like you said, up to 6 programs. So I guess I would signal 4 programs that are IMG friendly, and maybe a couple programs that are my dream program. But even within my dream program, I would try to reason it out. And I'm sure within your dream programs, there would be a few that are more IMG friendly, at least compared to your other dream programs. And maybe you have done research there, or maybe you have a research, maybe your mentor. The other thing would be maybe your mentor who you're working with, maybe he can have some put a good word for you in that program, or he can put you in touch with somebody who you can do some research with beforehand, or something like that, where you think you have a better chance than other program. And that's how I would approach it. I don't know if that's the right way to do it though.
Dr. Ghabili, your thoughts?
Yeah, Arun, I agree. This is, first year and nobody has any experience about this. These are just, personal thought. So what I would do is, I would send, signal to a program. Let's say I have a family member, or I have very close family, like, brother, sister, or whatever, in a city in which there is a program which is IMG friendly. I would definitely send a signal to that program just to show that, listen, I have family there. If I'm matched, I will be there. So that's the number one concern for a program, right? They don't want to match. They don't want to have a resident, which, for some geographical reason, they end up, not being in that program. So this is something programs really look for. If you have a family member somewhere and IMG friendly program, I would send a signal. And also, there are some programs in the nation which they have research track. If your research background is great, you have lots of publications, this is a good way to show that you are interested in that specific program. Because otherwise, being IMG among 1,000 applicants, even though you have a good, research background, it may be missed for some reason. So by sending signals, you're gonna just highlight that your application really, you think that your application fits that research track. And about, IMG friendly programs, when you go to Residency Explorer, you're gonna see that there are like programs which have like 40%, 50%, 60% of IMGs. So this is a good sign. This is reassuring that that program really takes IMGs, but it doesn't mean that you're gonna end up having an interview there, because all IMGs will definitely apply to that program. So just be realistic. If you have a connection, if your like PI or mentor knows somebody in that program, yes, I would send a signal. But other than that, if your IMG and that program gets like 70% IMG, just sending a signal, I don't think it would make a difference, to be honest. So just, just listen to your guts, what your heart says, and be realistic. Do not lose your chance of showing good, sending good signal. And, the whole idea is to be at the right time, at the right place, right? So you should act wisely in this situation.
Great, thank you. Sorry to put you guys on a tough spot with that question. So our next question is, that we got in here is, how does the year of graduation affect chances of matching? So I know some individuals might have graduated medical school in another country 6 years ago, 7 years ago. Yeah, in your guys' experience, how does that play a role, or does it play a role?
So, I mean, I think I'm a good example. I graduated in 2011, and So I'm old grad when looking at my application. So it can be considered as a red flag, although you cannot really tell it's a red flag because if you do nothing, after graduation, just sitting there doing nothing, yeah, that might be a red flag. But if you're actively like practicing medicine or doing research, just adding something to your application, so do not necessarily consider that as a red flag. Yes, people will, yeah, you're gonna be screened out from some programs which they have like cutoffs for years of graduation. Let's say, a program just looks at application from applicants who are within 5 years of graduation. If you're like 10 years, so you may have low chance of having an interview there. But again, it depends on what you did during those years. And I will say if you're old grad and you think that it may hurt your application, doing prelim really helps, because by doing prelim general surgery or internal medicine or transitional year, if you're doing great within a year or 2 years, there's going to be no question that you're old grad, okay, but you're doing great. You're taking calls, you're treating patients well, your behavior is great, your teamwork is great. So these are something that people are looking for in an applicant. By doing prelim, you're going to show all these, that you're really competent in all these areas. So definitely consider doing prelim if you think that having great gap in your education may hurt your application.
Awesome, thank you, Dr. Pandey.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with Kamyar. Having a gap is not so much of a red flag as not having done some relevant work during that period. And there's so many things. A gap can be so many things. A gap can be you doing a training in your home country. A gap could be doing research work. And all those are, I do not consider them as negative. And those would all be counted as positive. And I mean, the bottom line is, if you have a gap in your application, there's not much you can do about it, right? It is a fact, and it's something that's there. Now, the important thing is that it's definitely not a deal. It's not something that closes your door, definitely. Now, if you have done something that is not as much related to radiology as it could have been, yeah, sure, maybe as Kamyar said, there might be some certain programs that would may be less, that may see your application less favorably. But again, there will be a lot of other programs that would still be definitely open to your application, as long as you can show some continued interest in radiology. And we talked about some of the important ways to do it. And I think research is definitely one big part of it. If you can show continued interest in radiology research, or you can just show some US clinical experience. And that in that situation, US clinical experience definitely becomes more important, because then the question is, oh, if you have been that much out of training, the big concern is, okay, can you transition into being a trainee again? And that's what, and that's the only thing doing an internship or doing a prelim year would help you with, because now you have worked for a year in the US system, and there's somebody to vouch for you. I mean, you've worked with people here in the US, and they are saying that, okay, this person is a reasonable person who can work in a team and be productive. So that, I think that's all that clinical experience would show towards your application and help you in that case.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Pandey. Yeah, that makes sense. Doing a prelim year is a way to demonstrate if there's been a gap that you can still handle the workload in the United States. So that takes us to our next question here. So kind of along the lines of something that's a little bit newer is how will IMG applications be assessed in the setting of a pass-fail step? I know it hasn't happened yet, but this kind of segues to our earlier discussion. Will there be new emphasis on research productivity in your opinion, or what do you two envision the impact of that pass-fail step on IMG applicants?
So, I mean, I can answer that first. I mean, I definitely think research would become more important. I already think research is, especially in radiology, I feel like research plays an important role. And with pass-fail, I feel like even more so it would become important, because now, and we already elucidated to this point earlier, that now as an IMG, your USMLE scores were your only one of the biggest ways to shine. And now, if that's not there, then how do you make your application shine? And I think, as a matter of fact, the US clinical experience may even become more important now that it's just pass-fail. Now you have to you have to highlight other aspects of your application. And one big aspect of your application, especially in radiology again, is people like how your personality is. Because I've seen every radiologist that I've talked to in a senior position, they always like to say this famous quote, "Oh, is it a person who I would like to sit throughout the day next to me while I'm reading images?" And believe it or not, this has been a concern for so many senior radiologists, that before a young trainee comes, they want to know, is this a person they would want to work with and sit next to him the entire day, which is actually what happens in radiology. As a trainee, you would be sitting next to or attending the whole day, reading images, and they want to know if you're a person that they can have a nice talk with. So I think the US clinical experience again goes to a certain extent. It is a chance for you to show that. I mean, in your letters, people will talk about your personality and whatnot, and that can definitely. And coming from somebody in the US that they either know, or they are at least they believe more because it's in the US system, definitely helps a lot. So yeah, my bottom line, research and US clinical experience, I think, will become more important.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Pandey. Dr. Ghabili?
Yeah, so pass-fail status of step 1, definitely people will look at step 2 score, which they were already looking for that. So personally, I don't think there's going to be a huge change, because IMGs they mostly, as I know, they mostly apply with 2-step scores, and I personally don't think there's going to be a huge change for IMGs, unless your step 2 score is low, which is fine. But having good score is great. It's going to definitely boost up your application. But having a low score doesn't necessarily mean that you're losing your chances, because please do not consider and do not name or call it as a red flag. Red flag is in your mind. If you call something red flag, it's going to be a red flag. Red flag, if you fail, yes, then you may say it's a red flag. But as long as you're passed, then program knows that, okay, you were able to pass a big exam, so you should be able to pass board exam. Obviously, yes, if your score is high, then your chances of passing core exam is higher. But if once you're passed, certain programs will be okay with that. So then, as Ankur said, other parts of application, are highlighted in this, this season. It means that your productivity, your research background, or your experiences, your personality. That's a great point. You need to, as an IMG, you need to again shine among applicants. Application for IMG, even for US medical students, it's not just pushing submit button and just wait. No, it's not like that. It's like fishing. You just throw a net. You should be you should do something. And doing something means, we already talked about that. Going to conferences, attending conferences, trying to make connections, boost up your network, try to make connections with new people, because at any point you may need a support from that person which is in your network. So do not lose this opportunity. And as I said, the match process is multifactorial. It's not just one factor of USMLE score. Yes, that's one factor, but there are other things. I know people, everyone knows that people with very high scores were not able to match, or there are some people who with low scores, they end up matching in a good program. So just look at the bigger picture, try to enhance all aspects of your application rather than just focusing on exam scores.
Thank you, Dr. Bill. That's an excellent point. And that kind of takes us to our final question with regard to application tonight. And that's, should applicants take step 3 prior to applying? I know you mentioned typically they have step 1 and step 2, but is that something you would advise maybe in the setting, as you said, of a low step 2 score? Yeah, how would you go about advising applicants for that?
Yeah, if somebody's step 2 score is low, yes, you have another option of showing, if you can, pass a step 3 with good score, with a higher score, definitely do that. But I would be sure about getting good score, then I would go and take exam, because if you're not really ready for the exam, you are in the middle of application and just dealing with interviews, and you don't feel comfortable going to exam, I wouldn't do that, because the last thing you want is getting lower score than step 2 score, and then then you may lose other chances. So, but if you're feeling okay, yeah, definitely go and take exam. But again, the question is how much programs will take a look at your step 3 score, right? Again, as I know and as I heard, they don't have any screening criteria for step 3. If you end up having interview in a program, yes, that's a good way of showing, that you got higher score in step 3. But just if your goal is to, get more interviews, maybe taking step 3 wouldn't, make any difference.
Great, thank you. Dr. Pandey, any thoughts on that for you?
No, I agree. Step 3, I do not think step 3 is important at all for your application, except for in special situations that Kamir mentioned. And that would be a decision that everybody has to make for himself or herself based on their situation. As Kamir said, if you have a low step 2 score, which questionably can be a red flag, then you have to decide whether in that case, if you can really shine on your step 3, then I feel like it can definitely help. Again, I don't know that for sure, but I can only imagine that if you have a lower step 2 score, but you get a very good step 3 score, any program director would be bound to see that, and he'll be like, okay, yeah, this guy, maybe for this guy or girl, for some reason didn't get a great step 2, but he or she was definitely able to make that up. So he or she is definitely capable of getting a great score, and they are all they care about is whether you will be able to pass your board exam in radiology, and that shows that, okay, yeah, you have that potential. But if you're not sure, aside that point, nobody cares for your step 3. And if you're not sure, I would definitely stray away from trying to get into step 3. You also have to keep in mind that an year of internship prepares you for step 3 better, because on that exam, on step 3, there's definitely some stuff that is very, very clinical, and in internship year definitely helps you with that. People may say otherwise, but I personally feel it does help, because the amount of work, kind of clinical work you do during internship, you will be better prepared to take your step 3 at the end of your internship year. So I would, if you don't have a strong reason to take it, I would not push yourself to take steps.
All right, great. Thanks, Dr. Pandey. I guess, both of you pretty much on this situation where it takes step 3, unless it's only take it if you really have to like make up for a severely deficient step 2, and only if you're confident at that point. So.
And just to add, I think, again, I am not in that situation. I have not, and it's a complicated situation. The visa is a whole different world for IMGs. But I have heard that for H-1B visas, sometimes it can be helpful to have step 3. Again, since I never got into that, I never researched that, but I just wanted to bring it up if people want to look that up, and that might be another potential reason for them to consider taking step 3 if they are looking at for H-1B visa, which I personally wouldn't advise unless you really need it, because it definitely limits your options for radiology programs that would accept your application as an IMG.
Awesome, excellent. Did not hear that prior, so that's some excellent insight for people on this call here. So I guess we have time for one last question regarding the application. So I'm gonna keep it short. So how should applicants address any red flags on their application? I know it's a broad question, but what is your personal opinion on it, each of you? Thank you.
I mean, I'm pretty sure this is such a cliche and everybody knows this, and I'm sorry, I just have to repeat that. But I mean, the only way to do that is just to be able to show that how you made a red flag is something that has happened. You can't change the past, and all you can do is try to show and try to, in a very diplomatic way, put across your point as to how and what you did or would be doing in future to make that up, or if you can show something that you've already done that genuinely shows that that was towards making up for that red flag. But yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any red flag that closes door definitely for you. There's always the application is such a heterogeneous process. There's so many moving parts that you don't know. There's so many different ways that you can make up things in your application, whether it's your scores or your research or your prior experiences, whether clinical or radiology, or just your personality. And I mean it. I mean, each of those points, I don't know which one is more important than the other, because I feel like all of them are equally important. So I mean, a red flag is just a very small part of your application.
Dr. Billy, final thoughts on that?
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, I think this is my personal thought that, sometimes we as humans, we make, red flags for ourselves, which is not necessarily true. We say that, okay, the score is low, my year of graduation is high, I don't have like 20 papers, 30 papers, that's my red flag. No, it is not a red flag, unless that is really a red flag after talking with attending. So what I would tell is, talk with your mentors, talk with people who are in the process of, residency application and residency match, because they have lots of experiences. They've done this job for years and they've seen tons of applicants. So talk with them, show them your application and tell them your story, and then, just conclude if that's really a red flag or not. Then you may come up with this that, it may be a red flag or yellow flag. Sometimes it's yellow flag. It means that, yeah, it's, it might be a question, but it's not the end of the world. As Ankur said, if that's a red flag, you can't change it. You can't go back and fix something. So the whole point, again, it's not specific to radiology. It's all for residency application. If there is a red flag or yellow flag, and you know that people will ask about that, so be prepared for that. So, and then during interviews, if they ask questions about that, don't take it personal. People just want to know the story, and they want to know, what you learned from that experience. If you can present well, if you can show that, okay, your score was low, that was the reason, and what you learned from that. How did you make for that? Did you learn something, some technique of studying, and you implement it in next exam? That's fine. Then you just pass that question of red flag. So always be prepared, be honest with yourself, with your application. And again, don't take those questions personal. It's just that's just a conversation between two people, and people want to know you better.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Ghabili. Yeah, both your answers, being candid and, identifying and knowing how to address it clearly seems to be the way to address it. So thank you both for answering that question. That wraps up this section, the final section tonight on the application. So we just want to share your information out here, names, and Dr. Ghabili's Twitter handle. Dr. Pandey, do you have a Twitter, by the way, that you'd like to share? Oh, might be muted.
Yeah, sorry. No, I do not.
Okay.
I do not have a Twitter account. Maybe at some point I've created, but I hardly ever use it.
Okay.
So I'm not on Twitter, but I'll be happy to share my email if anyone has any questions. I'm always available. I mean, I always check my emails, and I'll be happy to respond on my email.
Awesome.
I can actually put that down here in the
Drop in
comment
chat.
section, and you guys can share it as you deem necessary. That's my personal email.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing that out there. And yeah, we just want to thank the panelists in particular, Dr. Pandey, Dr. Ghabili, really generous with your time. You guys are busy working, and it's president life is tough. So we really appreciate that you would make out some time for all of us, in particular all the applicants here that are heading into this season. And we want to let all the applicants know as well that to stay tuned for upcoming events. We're going to be having an upcoming residency webinar series on the horizon, and we definitely advise you guys to follow the TheRadRoom on Twitter because that's where all the updates are going to come, and there should be some updates in the very near future here. So we look forward to seeing you guys at our next event, and I hope you all have a great night.
Thank you, and have a good night.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for organizing this, and all the best to everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks, everyone.